At the start of 2001, Enron was the blueprint for large corporations, boasting 30,000 employees and an annual revenue of $100 billion. But by the end of the year, the company had garnered the title of biggest bankruptcy of all time, while Arthur Andersen, one of the Big Five, suffered a similar fate for their part in the scandal. So how did the energy giant, once valued at $70 billion, go from winning Fortune's most innovative company for 6 years in a row to bankrupt in the space of just a few months? Here's a story of fraud, corruption, and serious mismanagement. Here's how it happened. For some background, Enron was founded as a result of a merger between energy firm InterNorth and utility company Houston Natural Gas back in 1985. American Ken Lay was appointed CEO, and legendary artist Paul Rand, who also made the logos for IBM, UPS, and ABC, designed the now infamous Enron E. The energy market underwent significant deregulation throughout the 80s and 90s, leading to extremely volatile prices and a belief that anything was possible as companies rode the bull market that followed 1987's Black Monday. Enron then opened its own trading subsidiary to maximize profitability, and Jeffrey Skilling was appointed CEO of Enron Capital and Trade in 1991. Skilling oversaw the introduction of mark-to-market accounting within the corporation. That is the practice of valuing your assets based on predictions of their future prices rather than on historical prices. And in short, it basically gave Enron the right to decide their own profits, without being held accountable for the accuracy of the valuations. Based on these optimistic calculations, Enron's revenue figures began to skyrocket as the 90s wore on. The firm was named as Fortune's best company to work for in 2000, as its stock price peaked at $90 a share, and its directors outlined their expectation of even further profits in the near future. As Enron invested hundreds of millions more into projects both in the US and overseas, the company was able to hide these losses behind false estimations of the new asset's value, like a power plant in the northeast of England. To cover any reported losses or cash flow issues, Enron would borrow money from its SPVs, special purpose vehicles, which were subsidiaries of the corporation capitalized with Enron stock, making it impossible for the lenders to retrieve their money if the energy company was struggling. The crashing of the dot-com bubble in 2000 hit Enron's assets hard, as they had now diversified into industries like video on demand and high-speed broadband networks. Investors were becoming more cautious and increasingly skeptical of the firm's complex business model, and by early 2001, serious questions were being asked of Enron's financial statements. Lay stepped down as CEO in February to be replaced by Skilling, with Enron's stock price halving to $40 in the 6 months that followed. Amid widespread speculation about the company's accounting methods, Skilling stepped down from his new role in August 2001, as Lay returned to his former position. Analysts were downgrading Enron's stock rating, and Lay began selling millions of dollars worth of his shares in the firm. In October, Enron announced its first quarterly loss in 4 years thanks to taking charges of $1 billion from its underperforming assets, and the SEC began a formal investigation into its financial statements. During November, the company revealed it had overstated its profits by by $591 million between 1997 and 2000. Meanwhile, over 20,000 of its employees' 401k pension plans were locked for 30 days due to a change in administrator. A merger was agreed with close competitor Dynegy, but was called off due to concerns that Enron was still lacking transparency in its off-balance sheet debt. And on the 30th of November, the company's stock price hit rock bottom at just 26 cents a share, down from $80 back in February. And Enron filed for bankruptcy protection 2 days later on the 2nd of December, marking less than a year since it became the 7th biggest corporation in the United States. Thousands of employees lost their jobs and their life savings, and shareholders eventually sued banks like JP Morgan Chase and Citigroup for conducting deals with Enron, later winning $7.2 billion that was shared among the 1.5 million victims. Several executives went on trial for a range of charges related to the company's nefarious activity, including Lay and Skilling, who were charged with a total of 39 counts of fraud and conspiracy between them in January 2006, to all of which they pleaded not guilty. Lay died of a heart attack before the sentencing, but Skilling was sentenced to 24 years, of which he served 12 before being released in 2019. Not exempt from punishment were Enron's auditors, Arthur Andersen, who were one of the Big Five accounting firms, and also had their reputation dragged through the mud for their compliance in the fraud. They were found guilty of destroying documents that were of relevance to the SEC, which was caused to void their auditing license and leave the firm with no choice but to close. Hence their absence from the Big Four we know today, although their consultancy branch does still remain in operation as Accenture. The fiasco saw the United States Senate impose much tighter regulations to prevent a repeat in future, namely the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, which created a board to oversee audit reports for public companies and strict controls on what services these auditors could provide, not to mention the requirement for executives to sign off on all financial reports, meaning they could no longer plead ignorance to their firm's wrongdoings. Undoubtedly, the effects of the Enron scandal are still felt in the finance industry today. So let us know your thoughts and what you think the next Enron might be. And that's how it happened. Thanks for watching.
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello. Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. Let's do this. My name is Kevin Millette. I'm New Bedford Nostradamus and the president of the Massachusetts chapter of Philly. And if you've been following for the last couple of weeks, we've been undergoing an investigation into Eversource as it relates to Enron and the similarities that they found. So just as a catch-up, let's talk about the four things that we push as a similarities between what happened with Enron and what we're seeing with Eversource today. So the very first thing that we see, fake revenue. So Enron uses a mark-to-market, or used a mark-to-market accounting principle that allowed them to use future projections and agreements and count it as revenue regardless of the operations. Eversource uses pretty much a similar mechanism called revenue decoupling mechanism that allows them to use stabilized future projections as revenue instead of operations. Both of them allow the separation of reality from fantasy. The second thing we had is a complex web of subsidiaries. In Enron's case, it was operated by the CFO, and what it allowed them to do was offload debt onto separate business entities such that Enron's books are clean. In Eversource's case, they operate the same complex web of subsidiaries. It's managed by the CEO. In this case, the CFO left late 2022. So that complex web of subsidiaries that Eversource manages also carries that. The third thing that we saw is the creation of a monopoly. So in Enron's case, they use a complex system of regulators, push from the government, etc., to create a monopoly in the area that they operate in. In Eversource's case in New England, they basically operate a monopoly. And then the last thing that we saw, future borrowing. So what they're doing is they're carrying notes from the future, borrowing from the projected revenue of the future to pay the debts of today. So those are the four items that we've been discussing over the last couple of weeks. And so if you remember, the week before last, we sent off a series of letters, a series of certified letters. And those letters were to senators in New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Connecticut. So there were 6 senators there. We sent off to the federal institutions. We sent off letters to the PCAOB, the FDRC, the SEC, and the DOJ. And those were to let them know that we were investigating and we need to do their own. It looks like a clear-cut case of violations of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act we applied to Eversource. Then we also sent some FOIA requests. And we sent FOIA requests to the regulators and the credit rating agencies. But the regulators, we want to see all the communication between Eversource and the regulators. So in the Massachusetts, it's the BPU. In New Hampshire, it's the PUC. And in Connecticut, it's the PURA. And so we sent off letters to those 3 institutions in order to get more information about the communications between them. So we were looking for things like rate hikes, disagreements, public hearings, etc. Between those regulatory bodies, and so we have some good news. We erase this first. And so we have started to get some responses back from FOIA requests, which is a good sign. It's good. The very first one to respond has been New Hampshire. And so what they have done is they've given us a link to what they call their public documents website. And so let me show you the letters here. Let's take a look. So once again, remember that we talked about we had sent a letter to the 3 regulatory bodies in each one of their respective states. And we're asking for information on rate increases, requests and justifications, consumer complaints, PPAs and energy market behavior, infrastructure spending, transmission costs, investment delays, correspondence between Eversource and the state regulators, and consumer protection of regulatory. And then we asked for a fee waiver. Once again, we're doing this pro bono. So we sent that in, and we did get a response. So the first response was from here we go. This is from New Hampshire. So we did get a response, which is great. I mean, now we're asking for information. We have a dialogue. We have a contact. There are some things in here. So there wasn't any actual file sharing so much as it was a point to a specific repository that they have information. Some of the other things that they put in here requires a deadline of September 15th, which is 6 months from now. That's quite a long time for information sharing. So we started to dive into this site. So of course, before we even moved on, we responded with the receipt that we had received that information. Thank them for that, and we would let them know this week what's going on. And so now we took a look at the site. Let's take a look. All right, so this is the virtual file for the public records for New Hampshire. And right out of the gate here, you can see that there's a few problems. One, the master list, which contains the higher level information. You can see here, and it's very not too clear here, but you can see that the hyperlinks for 2022 and 2023 aren't there. So there's no underlying information, and 2024 and 2025 are missing. So usually when I see something like this from an audit perspective, I know that there's probably going to be some deficiencies in this data, in these data. The docket book does look complete up to 2025. And the registrations and certificates, when we click on these, once again, 2022 and 2023 are missing. And the available years that they have here, well, look at, we do have some information, hopefully. Go back and check this again. All right, so I've noticed that a significant amount of these, as just walking through them, are blank. So there, once again, so there are some deficiencies here. And what's good is, this is a starting point. I view this as a positive. Now, when we take a look at these years here, there are hundreds of documents. Hundreds. It's not a very good format to be able to insert. If I had a simple question like what were all the requested rate hikes for Eversource and subsidiaries, I would be forced to go through each and every one of these to find that information. So this is something that is quite a bit of like. And so now the next question is, so what do we do with this? So in its current format, this data is not user friendly. In order to create a cohesive story of the travels of Eversource for say the last 10 to 15 years, we need to extract, organize, and store this off in a format that's going to allow for easy access and easy access information retrieval. And so here's the thing. So I started to put these numbers inside of AI just to kind of figure out how much and how long this was going to take. So if we had a team of paralegals doing this. Now, once again, these are rough estimates, nothing concrete here. See what was going to be the effort to do so. We're talking hundreds of hours, if not thousands of hours, to extract, collate, and then restore this. That is not feasible. And when we look at the price tag of these, oh geez, price tag in team. So if we had 5 to 10 paralegals mid-level, we're talking anywhere from 3 to 7 months, anywhere from 225 to 270. Put this in a format that's going to allow us to grab out all the information. Yeah, that's quite a bit. And so this is where AI really comes into handy. So I expect to have this done by the end of this week. So I'd like to have a review of this in a format that is easily accessible and queryable. It's something that allows me to build the story of Eversource using just the New Hampshire's. I expect that done by this week. So if we talk about, so what did we say? We said 3 to 7 months, 5 to 10 paralegals, and what else did we say? We needed, what's the cost we had? From 225 to 275. All right. So next week's update, we're going to show you what we can do with the power of AI. We get this letter on Friday. And so this week I'm going to spend some time to utilize AI to both scrape the site, organize that into a database, and then use LLMs to heuristically analyze each one of these documents, identify its relevance, and then summarize and collate this from into a cohesive story. And so hopefully next week by Monday, we're going to have a much better purview of what's going on with the public records in New Hampshire. And we'll have a punch list of things of key deficiencies. So they have a public records laws that require them to meet certain criteria. And just as a rough overview, I can tell that the site hasn't been updated in a few years for some of these registration certificates and master lists. And the usability of the site is probably not up to snuff. This is a content management solution. This is in my experience, this is the lowest form. So this is the least effort to make this stuff researchable. Also, I've already done some scraping, and they put some efforts into making sure that this stuff couldn't be scraped automatically. So we're gonna get a little fancy with it, but we should be able to scrape, collate, and organize this into a way that's feasible. But what's great about this, and the name of this segment is called the Audit Begins, and that's because what I've done is I've put together a set of criteria by which I can score each one of the regulatory bodies against each other. Now we have three. New Hampshire was the first to answer. And now what I'm looking for is a rating system, right? So we're going to perform an audit on their publicly available records. So this is the first step that we can do. We will be submitting this to each one of the state auditors in their respective states, because what's good is now we can compare and contrast the performance of them on publicly available records in their response to FOIA requests. So right now, New Hampshire's already in the lead. They were the first to acknowledge the receipt of the FOIA and at least begin the communication process. So we're going to be doing some things here. So the purpose of this is to evaluate the transparency and accessibility of public records maintained by the PUC, the DPU, and the PURA. So we can see that here. We have the PUC, the DPU, and PURA. So the audit scope and objectives are this. We're going to see compliance with public records law, specifically New Hampshire Right to Know, RSA 91-A, the Massachusetts Public Records Law, MGLC 66, and the Connecticut FOIA. Then we're going to do accessibility and completeness of regulatory filings, including rate cases, supplier registrations, and agency orders. We're already seeing some deficiencies in there. Searchability and usability of online databases. Once again, it's just a series of hyperlinked documents. Once again, I would say usability is probably on a higher end. Frequency and consistency of updates to regulatory information. We're already seeing that there's already gaps. Public engagement practices, including hearing, stakeholder participation, and proactive disclosures. We'll find out what the score is as we go through this. So what we're going to do is we're going to apply a number system to this. So we're going to have a category, a couple of categories here: the weight due to importance, and a score from 0. I think we do it from 0 to 20. And so it's going to be compliance with FOIA and public records laws, availability of regulatory filings, searchability, ease of access, timeliness of updates, public engagement, and accountability. And so, and then we're going to, on that score here, 0 to 5 is going to be a failing. Right, so we have some very nitpicky criteria again. So, let's see, agency routinely fails to respond to FOIA requests within the statutory time limit and keep public records. I'm not going to bore you with the details here, but when we're done with this effort, what we should have is a fairly comprehensive audit of just the public requests, and then a report that which we can file with each one of the state auditors to let them know that they're deficient in key areas. Remember, standards start at the bottom. In any company I've ever worked for, or any place I've ever done any type of investigation analysis, what you find is that the level of comprehensiveness done at the bottom it's a direct indicator of how the rest of the process flows. And so I'm very happy that the New Hampshire regulatory body has already responded with receipt and a point to public information. But even on the public information sites, I'm already starting to see a lot of things that, some of the updates are years in arrears. And so if I'm seeing that with the public portion, I expect to see key deficiencies all the way to the top. When I've done security for companies, if the security compliance is not done correctly, I find holes all the way to the top. I'm looking at it from a monitoring perspective, and I see that the monitoring lacks, then the perception of the entire company structure is bothered all the way to the top. And when I see public records, which is the very lowest form here for public information, when I see deficiencies here, I expect to see holes all the way to the top. So it's, as far as New Hampshire being the first one to respond and send information, kudos to you guys. But we'll send a comprehensive report on findings on where you guys on the public records law are failing. things. We will apply or comply with the full investigation of the audit to each one of the state auditors to get that right. So even though we've only had one response, what we've done So even though we only have the one response, right now what we do have is a roadmap by which we can begin the audit. Now, a lot of companies right now, or a lot of states are having, or especially Massachusetts right now, we're getting a lot of pushback on audits. Once again, I think that's a fugazi. Like, we can do our own audit. Like, we can start, at least at the beginning, kick it off. Again, that's exactly what we're doing. We don't need anybody's permission to do this. We can take a look at the publicly available information, and we can begin to grade the systems on their performance. And when we find deficiencies at the bottom, I guarantee we're going to find deficiencies all the way to the top. So if stay tuned, right? Because we're going to have this, at least 4 New Hampshire have this audit complete. In the meantime, I'm going to start bothering PIRA and the DPU, Massachusetts, Connecticut, asking why their counterparts have already answered with the receipt of the FOIA request and at least begin some of that information dissemination. So what's good is we've got the ability to compare and contrast the 3 of them together, and I will be telling you which one's the best. So I always find that when you're creating dashboarding systems and scorecards, having some competitive nature between the 3 really does help move the process along, because there is a desire to be number 1, or at least not be last on the list. Yeah, so it's good news. We've begun some of the audit. We're here now, and we're going to be using a lot of AI to analyze, scrape, and heuristically put together these documents. So we'll have come Monday, we'll have at least a very comprehensive story on what's been going on in New Hampshire and Eversource over the last 10, 15 years. I'm Kevin Millett, and I am the new Bedford Nostradamus, and I have spoken. See you guys next. Just a quick update. Just as we were having this, we did get a response from the Connecticut PIRA as well. So just as an added bonus, we now have 2 of the 3 who have accepted or acknowledged the receipt of the FOIA request, and we're moving forward. So yeah, that's great. Live information as it's coming in. All right, see you guys next week.